Southeastern CaroLINES. It's also my favorite place to come out and watch a game. So if you are looking for a place to watch Tennessee, Georgia, or wherever your allegiances may lie, and you're looking for a place to watch the game, this is the best place because they've got great food, thick crust pizza, thin crust pizza, other great Chicago authentic eats. Plus, they've got a bunch of local beers on tap. They've got a bunch of TVs. So whatever game you want to watch, even if you don't want to watch a game, still come back through to Pizza Company, one of my favorite places in Nashville. But what a freaking week. I mean, what a day of football, first and foremost, but what a week of news, of stories of football in the SEC. Like, I feel like all week long, I have just been drinking SEC football news from a fire hose. And I'll be completely honest with all of you. I struggled a little bit to decide what I wanted to start on today, what I wanted to touch on today, because there's so much. Because not only do we have a 1 versus 3 matchup in a scenario that's really college football playoff #1 in Tennessee and AP poll #1 in Georgia, that's the biggest matchup in Sanford Stadium history. We got that going on. We've also got a top 10 matchup in LSU and Alabama and 2 games today that could decide the SEC East and the SEC West. But also, let us not forget that Auburn fired Brian Harsin this week, and they also hired Mississippi State's athletic director the week that they play Mississippi State, which is just disrespect on a completely different level. So we've got big games. We've got that big news. We've got 3 players entering the transfer portal at Florida, and just Florida becoming a total dumpster fire and just a big question mark about what the future of that program looks like. Why are these players so unhappy with the Billy Napier era in Gainesville? I mean, this week has just been massive. And I talked about last week. I said, I'm so excited for next week. Yeah, there's good games today, so on and so forth, but I'm really excited for next week. And I'm still excited for this week, obviously. I just didn't know that it would encompass everything that has happened this week. So I was a little bit torn on what to start with here, but I thought to myself, you know what? KISS, keep it simple, stupid. What do the people want to talk about? The people want to talk about the biggest game of the day, the biggest game of the season, and probably the biggest game for Tennessee since, early 2000s. This is probably the biggest game for Georgia. This is the biggest game for Georgia since they competed in the national title game this past year. This game is massive. I didn't expect this game going into the season to be as massive as it is. You can look at some games on the calendar every year and you say, oh, that's going to be a big one. For example, this year, Texas A&M and Alabama, after all of the Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban press conference coming at each other and attacking each other on social media this past spring or summer, whenever that was, you looked at that Alabama A&M game and you said, oh, yeah, no, that's going to be a game. You can usually look at, Georgia, Florida almost every year and say, oh, that's going to be a fun game. That wasn't necessarily the case this year with Florida going in through kind of a transitional period. But there are games even in June, July, and August that you can look at and say, I can't wait for that game. Now, I knew Tennessee was going to be good because they were good last year. I didn't think that this game was going to be the game of the century. I mean, I even talked with D-Mace over the summer. I was filling in on Chase Willie and D-Mace. And we were discussing Tennessee, Georgia, a little bit of a college football preview. This was early August. D-Mace with what I thought at the time was a very hot take. This was D-Mace earlier this summer.
Here's my hot take.
Okay.
Of the day. Well, it might be of the hell of the year. Tennessee will beat Georgia.
They'll beat Georgia?
Whoa.
They will beat Georgia.
Well, I will say that.
Why so confident?
I think Georgia has too many holes they got to replace on defense. That was a stout defense last year. I mean, those guys, they had, 3 first-rounders on that defensive front with the linebackers and the D-line. They got a lot to replace.
So at the time, you hear me and Willie's reaction. We're like, what? Wow, you're so confident. And while D-Mace's reasoning for why he thought Tennessee was going to beat Alabama, they lost so many pieces on the defense, which is true, that he thought that there were way too many holes to fill. Well, that's not necessarily the reason why this game is going to be a game. It's more so on the Tennessee side of things that Tennessee is just so much better than we all expected. The fact that Tennessee is right now the best team in the country, I didn't expect that. That was not on my bingo card for this season. So D-Mace, when I was making fun of you and giving you a tough time about your hot take of the summer, you know what, D-Mace? You were actually onto something. because Tennessee very much so can beat Georgia today. Tennessee very much so could be in the driver's seat for the SEC East, and Tennessee could punch their ticket to the college football playoff today. And that's before I get into my pick for this game and exactly the X's and O's and the fun parts about this game, what I want to watch about this game. I first want to express just how massive this game truly is, because I don't think that we can understate or overstate rather just how huge this game really is. And honestly, just how privileged we as college football fans are that we get to see a game like this, a game that could be so close, that can go either way, a game with massive implications, a game with two rivals that go back for a very long time, a team that won a national title game last year and has not lost a game since, going up against a team that went 7-6 last year and hasn't won a damn thing in the last 20 years. And this is a ball game. And it's massive for three reasons. First and foremost, the implications of what's on the line for this game. First and foremost, the Heisman implications. And, Stetson Bennett's not going to win the Heisman. I don't believe that there is a Georgia player that's even in the top 10 in Heisman odds. But Hendon Hooker, on the other hand, very much so is. Depending on whatever sports book you use, I like the Caesar Sportsbook app. That's my official sportsbook app. Love them. Check them out. Pretty much on every single sports betting app there is, Hendon Hooker has the best odds to win the Heisman at either plus 100 or minus 120 or whatever that might be. When Hendon Hooker started out the season, plus 1,000, plus 1,200, something astronomical odds. When CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, when they were running the table, and now Hendon Hooker is the overwhelming favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. Heisman Trophy implications and Hendon Hooker potentially winning the Heisman, that's on the line today. Now, do I think that Hendon Hooker still could win the Heisman, even if he does lose this game today? I do. Because I look at Hendon Hooker's stats, and they are nearly flawless. I mean, Hendon Hooker is putting up 300 and something yards a game. I believe he only has one interception on the season. Is that right, Jared?
Yes, that is.
Just one. Yeah, the one against Alabama.
Yep.
And that is that is insane. Hendon Hooker has, incredible stats. And then you play into the fact that Tennessee has run the table. They have massive wins on their schedule. Win on the road at LSU, against Alabama at home, and beating Georgia, the reigning national champion team, the number 3 team in the country that's pretty much been number 1 or number 2 or number 3 at some point this entire season that hasn't won a game. You add that to your resume. I mean, that's huge for Tennessee as a team, but you add that to your Heisman resume. And if Hendon Hooker balls out against the best defense in the country, a defense that single-handedly won Georgia a national championship last year, you ball out against a team like that with a marquee and add another marquee win on your schedule, I think Hendon Hooker easily has the strongest Heisman resume. But even if he does lose this game, even if the Vols do lose to Georgia, let's say it's a close game, Hendon Hooker still throws for 300 plus yards. Hendon Hooker still throws for 3 or 4 touchdowns. Hendon Hooker still looks as calm, cool, collected, and just dominating as he has all season long. There still is very much so a case for Hendon Hooker to win the Heisman. He's still going to get an invitation to New York. Now there's, a few more holes in that resume. So that's what's on the line here for Hendon Hooker and his Heisman hopes is this game. I personally think Tennessee wins today and Hendon Hooker plays a clean game, doesn't turn the football over, does what he's been doing all season long. I think Hendon Hooker basically wins the Heisman today. So that's what's on the line, Heisman implications. The second thing that's on the line in this Tennessee-Georgia game is the SEC championship. Winner of this game takes the East, and it's very simple. Georgia and Tennessee have been running the SEC East all season long. There's not a team that's even close. You win this game, you go to Atlanta, and you make your college football playoff resume that much stronger. And that's simple. Atlanta on the mind, you win today, and you're in. Now, the third thing, and this is the biggest thing, the biggest implication of today, is college football playoff implications. Because there are massive implications for both teams. You win this game, you go to the SEC championship, but I think college football playoff is so much bigger. Of course, you want to punch your ticket to Atlanta. Of course, you want the opportunity to compete for an SEC title. Those things are all important. But the college football playoff is the much bigger thing. And whoever doesn't win this game still has a path to the playoff. And I'll look at Tennessee first and foremost. If Tennessee loses this game, I think they still very much so have a case to get to the college football playoff. It would just make their road a lot more difficult. Tennessee loses this game. Georgia goes on to Atlanta. That game would decide the fate for Tennessee, I believe, the SEC championship. So you look at Georgia. Let's say Alabama goes to Atlanta. Georgia and Alabama compete for the SEC title. Tennessee fans then would have to be the biggest Georgia fans in America. Because if Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC title, Georgia has one loss, Alabama has one loss, and is the SEC champion. Both teams are getting bids to the college football playoff. But I don't see a scenario in which Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee all get into the college football playoff. You still got an undefeated Clemson team. You've still got an undefeated TCU team. And you're going to have whoever runs the table in the Big Ten, Ohio State or Michigan, whoever wins that game, that team's getting in. So I don't see a scenario in which Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama all get in. But how could you leave Alabama out? A one-loss Alabama team that won the SEC championship? It would be the same case as last year when Alabama lost in the regular season to Texas A&M, and then beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. Alabama made the CFP, as did Georgia, 2 one-loss SEC teams, both in the college football playoff. Tennessee wouldn't have an invitation there. If Georgia loses this game, I think Tennessee punches their ticket to the college football playoff. That's another thing. Is you win today, Tennessee, Hendon Hooker, I think, wins the Heisman. You obviously go to Atlanta, and you're in the college football playoff. That's what a win today does. If Georgia doesn't win this game, I still see a path for Georgia. I just don't think that it's as clear-cut as it is for Tennessee. Because if Georgia beats Alabama or whoever the West representative is in the SEC championship, then Tennessee does get into the college football playoff. It would be Georgia and Tennessee representing the SEC. But let's say Georgia loses this game, Tennessee goes to Atlanta, they represent the SEC East. Win or lose that game, Tennessee's in. Now, Georgia would have a more difficult case because Georgia doesn't have as strong of a resume as Tennessee does. Georgia doesn't have a win against a top 10 Alabama team. Now, they blew out Oregon in the beginning of the season, and that matters. But Georgia doesn't have the, 5 top 25 wins that Tennessee has. Georgia doesn't have the dominant wins over, Kentucky, for example, last week, LSU earlier in the season that Tennessee has. Georgia barely beat Missouri, and they blew out Florida last week. But Georgia wouldn't have as strong of a resume. The only way that I would see Georgia getting into the college football playoff if they lose to Tennessee is if TCU loses a game, if Clemson loses a game, or if those other undefeated teams that currently have cases to make the playoff now all of a sudden have a much weaker resume. So there is a lot riding on this game. College football playoff, Heisman, SEC championship. And I think in this scenario, winner takes all. Loser still has a path. It's just going to be that much more difficult. So how can these teams win this game? How can Tennessee go to Sanford Stadium and get a win and punch their ticket to the playoff? How can Georgia defend their reputation as the reigning national champion and say, hey, College Football Playoff Committee, you made a mistake by making us number 3? We'll get into that coming up next. Plus, your phone, 615-737-1025. We'll get your calls, your texts on our text line. It is Southeastern CaroLINES. I'm Caroline Fenton, 1025-1063 The Game, and we are live from 312 Pizza Company in Germantown.
At some point, it's a combination of who did you play and what does your skill set look like.
Get the best analysis of the big stories in the sports world with ESPN's Jason Fitz.
If you reach for a quarterback in the draft because you need one, you're going to set your franchise back 5 years.
Join Fitzy every Wednesday at 4:30. Presented by Blood Assurance. Jason Fitz.
I am 5'9.5"
on ESPN
1025 and 1063 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
Hey, it's Joe Rexler for FanDuel Sportsbook. Folks, the perfect time is now to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to favorite bets, your traditional money line, point spreads, player props. You can combine them for a bigger payout with a same game parlay. If I were looking, for example, at Titans Chiefs, one part of my parlay would be the under. The Titans are really good on defense. but they're also really struggling on offense. That'd be one of my parts of a parlay. You do whatever you want. Just do it on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use. Sign up with promo code Joe102 for that no-sweat first bet. Again, promo code Joe102. Make every moment more this season with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. You must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. First online real money wager only. Refund issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbet.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line. 1-800-889-9789.
Tennessee Home Builders wants to build you the home and addition of your dreams. Daniel is a licensed and insured Christian-based contractor serving Middle Tennessee and guarantees superior craftsmanship at the best price, including a free estimate and negotiable contractor fee. For decks, covered porches and patios, remodeling, additions, and custom builds, call Daniel at 615-796-3367 or TennesseeHomeBuilders.net. No job too big or too small.
Men, are you asking yourself questions like, why am I gaining fat? Why is my energy or sex drive down and maybe haven't been getting the exercise you need? If you want to get back to the man you used to be but just don't have that youthful energy, that edge you once had, you very well might have low testosterone. Low T causes all kinds of issues, from a reduced libido, lower drive, and bad sleep patterns to problems with muscle gain, bone density, and more. It may even contribute to erectile dysfunction, and if this sounds like you, it's probably time to get treated for your low T. At the Tennessee Men's Clinic, we've treated thousands of men for low T. We've seen them put on muscle, add to their energy, improve their sex lives, get better sleep, and just feel better. Plus, if you're like most men, you'll see results in only a few weeks. So make an appointment today and experience how testosterone therapy can truly change your life. Your initial appointment is only $99 with results in minutes. Call today, 615-208-9090, or go to TennesseeMen'sClinic.com. Visit our website to learn more, including side effects, treatments, extra. Results vary.
Being part of Cromwell Media, who owns this station, is a big deal because it's our people that make us what we are. So we're saluting Nicola Spencer and our sales department for 18 years of service. Ted and Holly Klimkowski have put in 12 years as our engineering and IT wizards. Willie Donick, midday host on 102.5, 106.3 The Game, and voice of the Predators, celebrates 11 years this month. And Yvette Wright in sales passes the 1-year mark. We salute them all and invite you to join the team. Send us a note at together@cromwellmedia.com.
Saturday Tailgate is on.
This game just feels, I don't know how to describe it other than it feels epic going in. That doesn't mean it will be coming out. But how has this week gone? I know it's cliche, but you got the pulse of the team. You're the head coach.
Yeah, I think our guys have really been locked in and focused. I think Tennessee got our team's attention last year. It was extremely physical. We understood the pace of the game. Now, we were a different defense, but man, the game was exciting playing up there, and a lot of respect for their defensive staff and the guys there. The most underrated part of Tennessee is probably their defense, because they play really, really hard and they play really aggressive, and a lot of respect for how they get after things and how they do things.
There you go. That was Georgia head football coach Kirby Smart on Paul Feigenbaum's show yesterday, saying, hey, I mean, respect to that team. So we were a different defense last year. Yeah, no duh, Kirby. And this is a much different Tennessee team this year. This game, this year, this Georgia-Tennessee matchup, what it was last year means nothing to me, because I think that while Georgia is a different team, they're still a very dominant team. While their defense is different than it was last year, still a very dominant defense this year. But Tennessee is a completely different team. But he also mentions that Jared Stillman's just texted me. He's gotten me all off my track. Whatever. He mentions that Tennessee's defense is very underrated, and I have to agree with Kirby Smart, because I think that there are two really key matchups here in this Tennessee-Georgia game that will probably motivate whatever you decide to put your money on for this game, whatever you decide to bet on. And I think that the very obvious conversation here is Tennessee's offense against Georgia's defense. Tennessee's offense is the top offense in the country. Georgia has one of the best defenses in the country. Georgia's defense is, they're notorious for their defense. Tennessee has been the most exciting offense to watch in college football this year. Obviously, that's going to be, a big matchup, and I want to get into that in just a second. But Kirby Smart mentions Tennessee's defense. And while everyone is going to be talking about Tennessee's offense against Georgia's defense, I think that this game is won on the other side. I think that Georgia's offense against Tennessee's defense is the key here. And I think that's going to be the more interesting side of this matchup, because Georgia's not known for their offense. But little secret here, just between us girls, Georgia has the second best offense in the country. And it's a sneaky good offense, because if you would have asked me, who do you think this has the second best offense in the country? If I didn't know who it was, Georgia would probably be like the 50th team that comes to mind, just because you think Georgia, you think defense. On the other hand, Tennessee's defense has been probably their biggest weakness, or at least that's what we've talked about being their biggest weakness all season long, because it was. And I would say in the first half of this season so far, that was Tennessee's biggest Achilles heel, was its defense. You look at that Pitt game, that game was much closer than it needed to be because Tennessee wasn't able to get stops. Even against Pitt's third string quarterback that came in when Keaton Slovis went down with injury, when their backup quarterback, I don't know his name, went down with injury, when their third string quarterback came in, and Tennessee still struggled getting stops. When Tennessee hosted Florida in week 4 or 5, whatever week that was, and Anthony Richardson entered that game having yet to throw a single passing touchdown, and he threw for 2 and threw for 450 yards because Tennessee's secondary, it couldn't tackle, they couldn't get pressure on wide receivers, they couldn't keep up with receivers, and they allowed a lot of points to be scored, but it was never a problem because Tennessee could give up 90 points, but they would score 100. But I think we've seen a seismic shift within this Tennessee football team, because I think Tennessee gets better and better every single week. That includes their offense. I think the offense starts to click, has started to click even more. I mean, week 1, week 2, week 3, that was still an electric offense. But I think throughout the season, they've just gotten better. They've just built more chemistry. I mean, you look at whenever Cedric Tillman went down with injury, Hendon Hooker was throwing to Brew McCoy, who was in his first year at Tennessee. He was throwing to Jalen Hyatt, which throughout his last 2 seasons at Tennessee hadn't really done much, to Ramel Keaton, who all of a sudden came alive against Florida. And, he wasn't a name that at least I knew before this season or before that game, because this offense has just grown so much throughout the season. But also the defense has too, because the defense that gave up 450 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns to Anthony Richardson earlier this year just limited Will Levis, a Heisman contender, a first-round NFL draft hopeful, to less than 100 yards passing, and that Kentucky offense as a whole to just 6 points. I didn't expect Tennessee's defense to improve as much as it has, because we had Chad Withrow on Stillman & Company yesterday. He said, I didn't expect Tennessee's defense to look like the 2000 Ravens out there. And that is so true. That's really what they looked like. I mean, I saw a Tennessee defender blow up a Kentucky receiver so hard that the ball popped out of his hand, and another Tennessee safety picked up the ball for an interception. I mean, it was just a massive defensive play for Tennessee, and that kind of play, that kind of secondary play, I haven't seen from Tennessee all season long. Tennessee statistically is the 8th best, or I guess 8th worst, however you want to put it, passing defense in terms of defending pass efficiency in the SEC. But I think that has so much more to do with what Tennessee was at the beginning of the season, more so than what they are now. Georgia, on the other hand, that matchup with Tennessee's defense is going to be really fun to watch because, like I mentioned, Georgia is sneakily the second best offense in the country. I think that Georgia has the best offensive line in the country. Tennessee, they were able to get a good bit of pressure on Bryce Young, but also I look at Alabama, and their offensive line is not an Alabama offensive line. And Bryce Young is the kind of quarterback that's able to escape that pressure, and he's able to scramble and is able to extend plays even when he has to run around outside of the pocket. Stetson Bennett isn't that kind of quarterback, but with the offensive line that Georgia has, I don't think that Tennessee's defense is going to be able to get that kind of pressure on Stetson Bennett that they did, say, on Will Levis or on Bryce Young. Kentucky and Alabama offensive lines, which statistically rank at the bottom of the SEC. Also, this is going to be the most difficult rushing attack that Tennessee has seen all season long. I mean, Georgia's averaging almost 6 yards per rushing attempt, which is also kind of a tip of the cap to the offensive line and just how good it is. I mean, you cannot beat Tennessee simply by running the ball, but I think that's going to be key in Georgia's game plan here because Georgia's going to want to eat up the clock. They're going to want to keep the ball out of Tennessee's hands. So I think that you're going to see Georgia run the ball a good bit, first and foremost, because that's a good part of their offense. A big part of their offense all season long has been running the football. And also, they're just going to want to take up time and eat up the clock. So I think that Stetson Bennett, Georgia run game against this Tennessee defense that has evolved throughout the season is going to be the deciding factor. But I don't want to bury the lead here because, Tennessee's offense against Georgia's defense, that's going to be the story. That's been the story all week long. That's going to be the story all day long. And the biggest question that I have about this game, can Georgia do what no other team has been able to do? And that is stop Tennessee's offense. And if Georgia can't, I don't think that anyone can. And to be completely honest with you, I don't think you stop Tennessee's offense. I think you simply just limit what Tennessee could do. Tennessee can put up 50 or 60 points in a game. If you can limit them to 30, that's the key there. You're not going to shut out Tennessee. You're not going to stop Hendon Hooker and what this Josh Heupel system can do. But can Georgia limit them? Because no team has held Tennessee under 34 points. 34 points. I mean, Tennessee has mastered the art of chunk plays. They're the best in the country at producing big plays. They've got 22 40-plus yard plays. That's more than any other team in the country. How do you stop that? That's the question for Georgia. And I know a lot of the conversation has been, outside linebacker for Georgia, Nolan Smith is out for the season. That was announced earlier this week. He's out with a torn pec. But I don't think that this game, and I don't think that limiting Tennessee's offense is simply about getting pressure up front. That's important. You're going to have to get pressure on Hendon Hooker. You're going to have to win those battles in the trenches. But I think the biggest thing here for Georgia, the biggest challenge for every team so far, but especially for Georgia, is can their secondary limit what these Tennessee wide receivers can do? All season long, Tennessee receivers have been, mastered the art of disguise and confusing defenses because they'll switch right before the ball is snapped. And then the DBs are looking around like, wait, who's my guy? Who am I defending? Where is he going? And then while he's confused and has no idea where his man is, he's probably in the end zone catching a 60-yard pass from Hendon Hooker. It's a confusing offense to stop. There's a whole lot of talent on that team, of course, but I think it's more so about the system and how they're able to confuse the defense. Can Georgia keep up with these receivers? Can Georgia kind of keep their head on a swivel and understand what these Tennessee receivers are doing when they're constantly on the move? That is the question there. My biggest thing is, can Georgia do what no other team has done? I think that Georgia is going to be able to at least limit what Tennessee can do. Now, I'll give my pick for this game. I'm taking Tennessee plus 8.5 because no matter who wins this game, I think it's going to be a close game. I think that these teams, while their strengths and their weaknesses differ, I think that this is a really good matchup for each team. I really think this game is going to be the difference of a field goal. I think it's going to be a fairly high-scoring game. I wouldn't be surprised if each team probably scores in the mid to high 30s. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 38-35 game. Now, if I have to pick a winner of this game, I lean very, very, very slightly Georgia, just because I give a little bit of the home field advantage here, saying as though Tennessee, I don't think has had a true road test on a stage this big. And they are on the road at Pitt, which I don't know how rowdy Heinz Field, Acrisure Stadium, whatever it is now, with a capacity of less than 70,000 is. And then you also look at Tennessee's road game at LSU, which was an 11 a.m. game. And LSU at night is, notoriously more intimidating. I've been to a lot of LSU games before. I've been in a lot of intimidating environments at Tiger Stadium. LSU, Tennessee, I was there. That was not one of them. Tennessee was able to shut that crowd up real quick. So this is going to be the most difficult road game that Tennessee has played this season, the most difficult road test. I would lean slightly Georgia, just the teeniest, tiniest bit, but I think that this is going to be a ball game. I think that it's going to be close. I'm taking Tennessee plus 8.5. And I was actually lucky enough that last week, whenever the line opened up 2 weeks ago, or whenever that was, it was Tennessee plus 11.5. I hammered that, but I still think that you should hammer the 8.5 because I think these two teams are just way too good for it to be the difference of 2 possessions. 615-737-1025 is our friend number. We'll get into your calls, your texts, your thoughts on Tennessee, Georgia, the biggest game of the day, the biggest game of the season, the biggest game for these two programs in quite some time. But there's another game happening today that normally kind of steals all the headlines almost every single year this week of the season. And I don't think we're talking about it enough. We'll get into that coming up next. Southeastern CaroLINES, I'm Caroline Fenton, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Hey, this is Roman Yossi, and this the smash row.
Going to the front of the net, he scores. What a gorgeous move. Roman Josi.
You're listening to the flagship of the Nashville Predators radio network, ESPN 102.5 The Game.
Middle Tennessee, you can count on an award-winning service team for all your home maintenance and improvement needs. Lee Company, we're A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau and trusted by thousands of homeowners in our community. Our team is ready to assist with all your home maintenance projects, heating and air conditioning, plumbing, electrical, appliance service, and more. Experience the convenience of calling one phone number for all your home maintenance needs. Call Lee Company today at 615-567-1000 or visit leecompany.com.
This is a relationship, just like your relationship. Dating and getting married is awesome and fun, but having been married for 24 years, I can tell you it only gets better.
Meet Ward Herbert, manager at Genesis Diamonds, talking about the importance of having a long-term marriage with your spouse and your jeweler.
What's in the DNA here is relationship building. How can we be a part of your love story forever? It's your engagement ring, it's your wedding band, it's your anniversaries, it's gifts for your children, it's being a Genesis customer for life.
Genesis Diamonds, where it's never about making a sale, it's about making a hero.
The greatest joy I get is helping you find your perfect ring, helping you find your perfect diamond, and having you walk out with a huge smile on your face because you know she's going to love it and it's going to be something that you can be proud of forever.
And Ward knows a thing or two about relationships as a marriage counselor and an ordained minister. He can provide a little extra added value.
I did a wedding ceremony for one of our customers 2 months ago. He did not have a minister at the last minute, and I performed his wedding ceremony for him.
Genesis Diamonds, going above and beyond for every customer.
Now you may kiss the bride.
Green Hills and Cool Springs.
When it comes to sports, it's all happening right now. Hey, it's Chase McCabe. Football, basketball, hockey, and soon enough, the World Cup. And there's no better place to wager on all of that than Superbook Sports. When you sign up, deposit, and wager in the same day, Superbook will give you a bonus up to $1,000. When the sports world is busy, it's time to get busy winning some money. So download the Superbook Sports app or visit superbook.com to wager and win today, just like me. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789.
Black Friday deals are here earlier than ever at Electronic Express. Come into our convenient locations for great deals on all of your favorite brands like Samsung, GE, Microsoft, Cuisinart, and more. Electronic Express has huge savings in every department: computers, appliances, 4K TVs, housewares, furniture, mattresses, and more. Save up to 40% with up to 36 months free financing. Shop in-store or online at electronicexpress.com and get free express delivery on most items. Electronic Express, we make it happen.
OrderGreen.com. You know them by now. They're my only choice for high-quality THC and CBD products, and they're delivered right to my doorstep. Hey, folks, Joe Rexrode here. Yes, you heard that right. OrderGreen.com will send cannabis products right to you with discreet same-day shipping. OrderGreen.com has been great for me. Just what I need during this busy time of year. Takes the edge off physically, mentally. Terrific products, and if you use promo code Joe20, you're going to get 20% off your first purchase at OrderGreen.com. Do you have a subscription to OrderGreen.com? It'd be a lot cooler if you did. You won't be able to tell if you're in Colorado or Tennessee. Trust me, that's OrderGreen.com.
This is Saturday Tailgate.
That you didn't want them to put too much pressure on themselves with Alabama. Did they do a good job of that this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think they did. I mean, the preparation has been really good. I think, you know, what I saw maybe, you know, a little bit at the end of practice yesterday was, Coach, we need to get playing here. You know, this is a lot, you know, and I think they're anxious, they're excited, and I don't mean anxious in terms of nervous. I think they're excited about playing Alabama. I think there's a lot of respect for them. They know they're a really good football team. I mean, they know that this has been a one-sided series. You know, I think they've won. They're excited about this opportunity to play a program that has been consistently the best or measured as the best in the country.
There's nothing like the head coach of your football team pointing out the fact that your football team has beaten your biggest rival only once in the last 10 years. Thank you for that reminder, Brian Kelly. But again, that was LSU football coach Brian Kelly on Thursday in his press conference talking about how ready they are to play Alabama. LSU on a bye last week. All the talk the last 2 weeks has been about Alabama, and they're ready to play. And obviously, for very good reason, all of the discussion this week has been about Tennessee, Georgia. This is a massive, massive game. And I just pointed out how many implications there truly are for that game. Two of the best teams in the country competing for a spot in the SEC championship, competing for a spot in the college football playoff. That is huge. And I think it's kind of overshadowing another really big game in the SEC. Because we talk about how Tennessee and Georgia will decide the SEC East. I think you might see the SEC West be decided today. You might be rolling your eyes and saying, the LSU homer. And I promise you, I'm not. Because the winner of this game, I fully believe, will go to Atlanta and represent the SEC West. LSU has 2 losses. None of those losses are to an SEC West team. 1 loss to Florida State at the beginning of the season, and 1 loss to Tennessee in the middle of the season. Alabama has already lost to Tennessee, and if they lose to LSU, with LSU's win over Ole Miss and potentially a win today over Alabama, LSU would have to win out the rest of the season, games against Texas A&M and Arkansas. If they win out those games, then LSU wins the SEC West. And I don't think that we are talking about that enough. Alabama wins today, Alabama wins the SEC West, and that feels like, the most obvious narrative that we probably all just assume is going to happen. Now, I don't think that this game is going to be as much of a shootout as Tennessee-Georgia is. I don't think this game is as equally matched as Tennessee-Georgia is. Alabama very clearly is a very good football team. It's by the 6th ranked team in the nation. LSU is also the 10th ranked team in the nation. And LSU has been a team that has improved by leaps and bounds throughout the season. Because you might be a person that hasn't watched a single LSU game since that Florida State game, and that's fine. But this LSU team is a completely different team than they were against that Florida State team. LSU put up 45 points against both Florida and Ole Miss, an undefeated top 10 Ole Miss team. They came into Tiger Stadium, and LSU shut them out 42-3 in the second half. That is pretty big. And you might say, well, Ole Miss was overrated. And I'd probably agree with you with that Ole Miss was undefeated against the likes of Vanderbilt and a very close win over Kentucky, a way closer than it needed to be game against Tulsa. I understand. But I think that we're not paying enough attention to what LSU has been doing and how much they've improved. As I look at this LSU offense over the past 2 weeks, and this is a game this is a team rather, that is very much so carried by its defense. But I look at LSU's offense and Jaden Daniels, their starting quarterback, very specifically. And Jaden Daniels is a player who only threw for like 80-something yards in the first half against Auburn. A quarterback that seemed like he just couldn't make connections with those receivers and rather deferred to his legs. And they were able to beat the likes of Mississippi State and New Mexico earlier this season by doing that. You weren't going to win very many games by running the ball with your quarterback. And I think that they were exposed against Tennessee when they tried to do that. Against Florida, Jaden Daniels threw for, he was 23 of 32, threw for 349 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And they added 180 yards on the ground with 3 rushing touchdowns. LSU against Ole Miss, Jaden Daniels was 21 of 28, 248 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, rushing 250 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground on 48 carries. This LSU offense is a lot better than it was earlier in the season. So if you are somebody who doesn't watch a lot of LSU or only watch them against Florida State or watch them get completely embarrassed against Tennessee, understand that this offense, which was pretty much exclusively a ground game and you just hope that the defense could do enough to get by, now it is very much so a balanced offense. This is Jaden Daniels, who is looking more like 2019, freshman All-American at Arizona State rather than 2020 and 2021, and even earlier in the season at LSU when he really struggled throwing the football. This is a different LSU offense. And this is an LSU offense that I think is at least going to make this game interesting for Alabama, against Alabama. Another element of that is Alabama on the road this season and even last season as well has struggled mightily. Ever since Bryce Young took over as starting quarterback of the Alabama Crimson Tide, all but 2 road games have been decided by 3 points or less. 2021, Alabama at Florida. They won that game 31-29. Florida later fired their coach that year. It was not a very good Florida team. At Texas A&M, lost that game 41-38. A Texas A&M team that went on to win 8 games. Again, not a very talented, or not talented. There was a lot of talent on that team. Not a very successful Texas A&M team last year, rather. At Mississippi State, that was one of them that Alabama just blew them out 49-9. At Auburn in the Iron Bowl last year, an Auburn team that was just felt helpless. Alabama went to double overtime and just barely squeaked out a 24-22 win. Going to this year, at Texas earlier this season, Such a close game that Alabama easily could have lost at Texas, won that game 20-19. At Arkansas, again, another game that Alabama blew them out 49-26, and then at Tennessee lost that game 52-49. So 5 of the 7 road games that Alabama has played over the last 2 years have been decided by 3 points or less. And focusing on this year, Alabama's 3 road games at Texas, at Arkansas, at Tennessee. Alabama has combined for 42 penalties for 355 yards in 3 games. 10 penalties for 101 yards at Arkansas, 17 penalties for 154 yards at Tennessee, 15 penalties for 100 yards at Texas. That Texas game was the most penalties committed by any Nick Saban coached Alabama team in history. And then Tennessee, they broke that record again. I think that's another element here of Alabama on the road. They're not as disciplined as they are. They commit penalties. It's difficult for them to put up points. I mean, you look at all of these games. I mean, the Tennessee game, they put up 49 points. But, I mean, against Texas, they only put up 20 points. Against a Texas team that's now 5-3 and lost to a 4-4 Texas Tech team. It's puzzling to me why Alabama isn't as dominant as they have been in the past. Alabama under Nick Saban is elite. Alabama under Nick Saban this year has been trying to skate by to get wins. Alabama under Nick Saban this year commits penalties. Alabama teams, Nick Saban coach teams don't commit penalties, but they do. Is it the coaching staff? Is it Bill O'Brien? Is it Pete Golding? Is it the personnel? Does Alabama just not have as good of players as they have had in the past? And I don't know the answer to that. But Alabama has struggled on the road the past 2 years. That's a 7-game sample size where Alabama has either lost or won very narrowly in 5 of them. I think that's going to come into play here. So that's ultimately why I am going to take LSU to cover the plus 13.5. Because Alabama does struggle on the road. Now, ultimately, I think Alabama wins this game. I think Alabama is just the better team, better coach team. They have the better quarterback. Bryce Young, he's the best quarterback in college football. And honestly, I don't think it's that close. I think Bryce Young proved that against Tennessee. Bryce Young was the best player on the field that day. Tennessee got the win, of course, and credit to Tennessee for beating a really good quarterback and a really good team. I think Bryce Young has so much talent that's being wasted on an Alabama team that doesn't have the talent to match it. So better coach. Brian Kelly's a good coach. Nick Saban's better. Better quarterback, and I don't really think it's close. I think Bryce Young is much better than Jaden Daniels. But I think that you have to give credit to the improvement that LSU has made over the past couple of weeks. And you also have to factor in that this game is in LSU. That this game it's a sold-out crowd at night in Death Valley. You might say, well, Alabama's used to that. Alabama plays at LSU every other year. They play Tennessee every other year too. And that crowd clearly played a factor in that game. So I'm going to take LSU to cover the 13.5. I think it's going to be about a touchdown difference of the game, but I do think Alabama ultimately gets the win here and ultimately punches their ticket to Atlanta to represent the SEC West. Now, who they'll be playing, we'll find out around 2:30 this afternoon. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get your calls, your texts, but I want to get into the rest of my picks of the day. Are we seeing a little bit of shakeup at Texas A&M? We'll get into that coming up next. It's Southeastern Caroline. I'm Caroline Fenton. It's 102.5-106.3 The Game, and we are live at 312 Pizza Company in Germantown.
Did he get it? He did. Touchdown, Vandy.
This is your home for Vanderbilt football.
Today, Vandy football is back at home. Welcome South Carolina to First Bank Stadium. Coverage starts at 5 p.m.
Vanderbilt is on 93.3 Classic Hits and the Classic Hits app.
Blood Assurance, this community's local blood centers, is hiring for several open positions in the Nashville area. Be a part of a company that helps save lives by providing the local hospitals with the much-needed life source of blood. They offer competitive pay, great benefits, paid time off, and retirement benefits. Blood Assurance has a family-friendly environment. Go to bloodassurance.org/careers. Again, that's bloodassurance.org/careers to apply.
Do Tennesseans know every word to Rocky Top? Well, the construction industry doesn't call our area rock country for no reason. Harmon Tractor and Equipment is your tractor and equipment solution and Middle Tennessee's employee-owned Link Belt and Takeuchi dealer. So if you hit rock, need a breaker, and it's time to dig, give them a call. Rent a track loader, an excavator of any size for landscaping, building a pool, construction, utilities, or more. Visit ParmanTractor.com, providing totally outrageous customer service.
Hey, it's Hutton. Interest rates are rising, but not at Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. Replace your old unit fast before new regulations increase prices up to 20%. Get a new unit today at today's price and receive up to $1,500 off, or get 18 months of no payments. So the first payment is not until spring of 2024. At Spring Hill Heating and Cooling, all new systems come with a 10-year parts and labor warranty. Schedule your appointment now at springhillac.com. That's springhillac.com.
Hey everybody, Big Joe here for Apple Collision Centers. And you know I'm always on the go, but the distraction that an automobile accident causes could even slow my pace down to a stop. But my friend and CEO of Apple Collision Centers, Stan Harrison, has a plan to get you and I back on the road and fast.
We at Apple Collision Centers know you deserve the best quality service. We always recommend original equipment parts, and we use only the best Sherwin-Williams finishes. 3 convenient locations: Hendersonville, Gallatin, and Oak Hickory. And you can always visit us online for your estimate needs at applecollisioncenters.com.
The Nashville Jam Company is already a super popular weekend breakfast and brunch destination. But with summer over, it's time to put the beach body away for a while. So for fall, they've expanded their offerings and added what they call the Meat and 3 menu. Yeah, cool weather and Southern comfort food go hand in hand. And the stars of this show are the hefty meatloaf, Southern fried catfish, slow-cooked pot roast, fried chicken, Salisbury steak, and a slew of other rib, stick, and delicacies. And they have salads, too, if you're into that kind of thing. Come see the new menu Monday through Friday from 10:30 till 2.
Hey, it's Chase McCabe, and every season is screwball season in my house. No matter the time of year, that rich, smooth taste just hits the spot. Y'all know Screwball. It's made with real whiskey, peanuts, and peanut butter, and it's just flat out delicious. It's my favorite. However you take it, as a shot, in an espresso martini, or a peanut butter old-fashioned, make it a Screwball peanut butter whiskey. Enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2022 Screwball Spirits, LLC, San Diego, California. Whiskey with natural flavors, 35% alcohol by volume.
You're listening to Saturday Tailgate.
Southeastern CaroLINES. I'm Caroline Fenton, 1025, 1063. The game, kind of highlighting the 2 biggest games of the day. Tennessee, Georgia, obviously, biggest game of the day, biggest game of the year. I'm taking Tennessee to cover the 8.5. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a barn burner kind of game, similar to what we saw against Alabama. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as that game, but I think it's going to come down to who has the ball last, because that team's probably going to be able to score and they win that game. So I'm taking Tennessee plus the 8.5. Jared, you're a diehard Tennessee fan. How do you feel about that?
I'm 100% taking the Vols. I think it's going to be a close game.
Is that a homer take, or is that
it's a
with your head or your heart?
No, that's definitely with my head. I mean, I try to take my heart out of it as for the most part. I mean, yeah. I think that this is going to be a close game. I'm with you. This could be like a 4 to 5, 6 points kind of game. At the most. I
think so. Even less. I don't think it's going to be, because 8.5, I mean, that's a 2-possession game. I don't think it's going to come down to that. I think it's going to come down to who has the ball last and who's able to score points last. Exactly what we saw with the Alabama game. You know, Tennessee had the ball last. They were able to get the ball through the uprights. They won that game. Also, LSU, Alabama, who is going to have control of the SEC West after this day? I'm taking LSU to cover the 13.5. I think that's just a lot of points, but I think Alabama ultimately gets the win there. But looking around the rest of the SEC, there's another big game that's not necessarily a big game if you aren't a fan of either of those 2 programs, but I look at it as a big game because both of these teams absolutely, positively need a win, and they need it bad. And that's Texas A&M and Florida. Both of these teams have had things going on within their programs that are just honestly kind of inexplicable, like weird off the field issues. You know, remember a couple of weeks ago, a Florida player posting on his Instagram story in the locker room with the caption, "F this team." Made that the PG version. And then we see 3 Florida players enter the transfer portal this week. We also saw Billy Napier dismiss their 5th-year linebacker, Brenton Cox, who I didn't know why he was suspended or dismissed from the team, rather. I saw Billy Napier's statement, and I scoured the internet to try and figure out exactly what happened. Was it a conduct issue? Was it I didn't know what it was, but I think it was released later that he threw a punch after the Georgia-Florida game. So he has been dismissed from the team, which is a huge loss for the Florida defense, seeing as though he's a really freaking good player. So you've got some behavioral issues with Florida. On the other hand, with Texas A&M, they're in a 4-game losing streak after just suspending 3 of their freshmen for supposedly smoking weed in the locker room at South Carolina. Now, all of that to say, both of these teams need wins really badly. They need wins for their records. Florida's lost 2 in a row. Texas A&M has lost 4 in a row. They need these wins for a little bit of positive press, for a little bit of positive momentum. Both of these teams are dealing with some locker room issues and some questions within the coaching staff. And both of these coaching staffs are in completely different scenarios. Texas A&M, they've got a head coach in Jimbo Fisher who's in his 5th year and has nothing to show for it. Billy Napier is in his 1st year, and he's just trying to establish a positive culture. And I don't know how effective that has been so far this year. So both of these teams need a win, and they need a win badly. And it's weird for me to say that I think that Texas A&M has more momentum going into this game because they've lost 4 in a row. But I do think that A&M has kind of the more positive, sliver of hope, at least, because they're coming off of a really close loss to Ole Miss. They lost that game last week by just a field goal. I think they may have found their quarterback of the future in College Station. But just when Texas A&M, you think they're taking a couple steps forward, they just get hit in the mouth and they take a few steps back because Connor Weigman, who started that game for Texas A&M against Ole Miss, who looked incredible last week, threw for over 300 yards, 4 passing touchdowns last week against a really solid Ole Miss defense, and who was really in the driver's seat against Ole Miss. I mean, Texas A&M at one point got down, and Connor Weigman, as a true freshman, kept his composure, was able to stay cool in the pocket, and was able to get Texas A&M coming back. Just when Texas A&M gains a little bit of momentum. That quarterback has the flu, and he will be out today against Florida. And I don't believe it's been officially announced, but if he has the flu, I can only imagine you are probably going to see Haynes King get the start today against Florida. Huge gut punch for Texas A&M, just when they got excited about the quarterback that looked better than any other quarterback, Haynes King and Max Johnson, we've seen all season long. So for that reason, I am going to take Florida to cover the 2.5, just because we've seen a lot from Haynes King. Haynes King wasn't able to beat App State. I think this Florida team, while they're very hot and cold, while it's very much so a tale of 2 Anthony Richardsons, you don't know if you're going to get the Anthony Richardson who threw for 450 yards and added another 100 yards on the ground against Tennessee, or the Anthony Richardson that looked like a freaking superstar against Utah earlier this season. Or if you're going to get the Anthony Richardson who threw for less than 100 yards, had negative rushing yards, and 2 or 3 interceptions against Kentucky. Anthony Richardson is a really hard one to try and figure out. So even though Florida is pretty hot and cold, even though Florida will be without their best linebacker who was dismissed earlier this week, even though Florida just has a whole lot of bad juju surrounding that program right now, I think Haynes King has proven that he just can't win those games. I think Haynes King has proven what kind of quarterback he is. So I am going to take Florida to cover the 2.5. Kentucky, Missouri, another game that, looking at the schedule going into the season, I thought Kentucky would be much better. And honestly, I thought Missouri would be much worse. I don't think Missouri is that god-awful of a football program. They're not a terrible, terrible football team. They're not good. They're not great. They're absolutely at the bottom of the SEC East. But if you look at those 3 teams in the East that have been struggling both this year and in recent history, South Carolina, Missouri, and Vanderbilt, I would probably put Missouri at the top of that. So congratulations, Missouri, for being the winner of the losers. Kentucky is favored by only 1.5 in this game. I don't think that's fair. I think that's an overreaction to Kentucky's loss to Tennessee last week. And Tennessee made Kentucky look dumb, honestly. Will Levis, a quarterback who was, number 1 overall pick, apparently, per Joel Klatt. I don't necessarily see that happening, but Will Levis is still a pretty good quarterback. Chris Rodriguez is one of the top running backs in the league. I think Kentucky's able to win this game by at least 1.5. I think Kentucky gets this win by about a touchdown. But Missouri is a fun football team to watch. And Missouri, fun fact, 2nd best team in the SEC in total defense, only behind Alabama, 3rd best rather, behind Alabama and Georgia. Fun fact, I did not realize that until I looked it up, and even the stats, I could hardly believe my eyes. So I'm going to take Kentucky minus 1.5. I think that's Vegas' overreaction to their loss to Tennessee last week, and I think Kentucky's going to be angry about that loss to Tennessee, and they're angry about getting embarrassed, and they're going to want to come back and make a statement against Missouri. So give me Kentucky minus 1.5. We've also got Auburn, Mississippi State kicking off today. It's the battle of the athletic director. Auburn hiring Mississippi State's athletic director on Monday, the week that they play Mississippi State, which is just chef's kiss. It is peak SEC drama. But I'm taking Mississippi State minus 12.5. That's a pretty big spread. This Auburn team really hasn't quit all season long. I have to give credit to this Auburn football team, but they fired their coach this week. Auburn's just not very good. Mississippi State is kind of a difficult team to put your finger on. I don't really necessarily know exactly what Mississippi State is, but I think with how downtrodden Auburn is, especially after firing Brian Harsin this week, I think Mississippi State's able to get the win, and I think that they're able to get the win big. Now, a couple more games to keep an eye on outside of the SEC in terms of college football playoff implications. TCU, Texas Tech kickoff today. TCU is undefeated. They are 7 in the college football playoff rankings, but if they do, run the table in the Big 12, they're able to win the Big 12 championship. I think that they punch their ticket. They got to beat Texas Tech today. Also, Notre Dame, Clemson, another undefeated team, top 4 in the college football playoff. That could be an interesting game today. So TCU, Texas Tech, Notre Dame, Clemson, also keeping my eye on today. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you to 312 Pizza Company for being the most gracious host every Saturday, the best place to watch a college football game in Nashville. Great pizza, great beer, great people. Come out to 312 Pizza Company. We'll be back next Saturday at 10 a.m. ESPN Radio is up next.
Nashville.com. Pick the 3 football underdog teams each week you think will win for a chance to win weekly prizes, like a pair of tickets to a sporting event or to a concert in Nashville. Oh, yeah! Go to theGameNashville.com or the Game Nashville app and sign up and play now. Then tune in every Thursday at noon for our expert picks. Silly Underdogs is presented by Volunteer Hose and Gasket and Superbook Sports.